The snow had been falling gently all day, coating the world outside in a soft, white blanket. On this crisp Christmas Eve, the streets of the small town glowed under the warm light of festive decorations. Twinkling lights hung from every lamppost, casting a soft golden hue across the snow-covered ground. Children's laughter echoed from the nearby park, where snowmen stood proudly, their carrot noses tilted at odd angles, and sleds raced down the hills. The holiday markets bustled with people wrapped in scarves and mittens, browsing wooden stalls that offered steaming cups of hot cocoa, handmade ornaments, and gingerbread cookies. There was an undeniable magic in the air as the town prepared for its favorite holiday. Yet, in the midst of all this festive cheer, a young girl named Lily stood apart, watching the celebrations from the corner of a nearby street. Her breath fogged in the cold air, and her dark eyes looked longingly at the families hurrying by, laughing and holding hands. Her cheeks were rosy from the chill, but her expression was distant, as though the joy around her was something she could never fully partake in. Lily was 12 years old, an orphan who had lived in a series of foster homes since she was 5. This Christmas would be no different than the last, spent alone, without the warmth of a family. Her foster mother, Mrs. Hayes, had been kind but distant, always too busy with her own life to truly make Lily feel like she belonged. The foster home was small and overrun with other children, none of whom had much interest in her. There were no stockings hung by a fireplace, no cozy family dinners, and no one to share the magic of Christmas with. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, Lily had tried to stay optimistic. She had saved up a few coins to buy herself a small treat, perhaps a candy cane or a toy, but it was hard to ignore the ache in her chest when she saw the other children happily making their Christmas lists or receiving presents from their families. On this particular Christmas Eve, Lily stood near a street corner by the old bookstore, watching the passers-by with a sense of yearning. Her heart tightened as she spotted a young mother holding the hand of a little girl around her age, both of them laughing as they picked out a bright red scarf at a vendor's stall. Lily's hand instinctively reached up to touch the worn sweater she had been given by Mrs. Hayes, a gift she had barely ever worn. It didn't bring the comfort or warmth she wished it would. As the evening grew colder, the streets became quieter, and most of the families began to head home, their laughter fading into the distance. Lily wrapped her arms tighter around herself, wishing she could just disappear into the magic of the season. She had almost given up on hoping for anything special when she noticed an elderly woman standing across the street, watching her intently. The woman's face was lined with age, but her eyes were warm and kind. She wore a heavy red coat, and her silver hair was tied neatly in a bun beneath a fluffy white hat. Lily didn't know why she felt drawn to her, but something about the woman's presence stirred a sense of curiosity. The elderly woman crossed the street with slow, deliberate steps, her cane tapping gently against the pavement. When she reached Lily, she smiled softly. "Cold out here, isn't it, dear?" she said, her voice gentle but strong. Lily blinked in surprise. "Yes. I guess I'm just waiting for the bus to go home," she said, though she had no intention of going home to the foster house. The idea of spending another lonely night there felt unbearable. The woman studied her for a moment, as if seeing something deep inside her. "I don't think the bus is coming anytime soon. Why don't you come inside for a bit? It's far too cold to stand out here alone." Lily hesitated. There was something in the woman's eyes that made her feel safe, even though she didn't know this stranger. After a moment, she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman took her hand and guided her into a nearby shop, one Lily had never noticed before. It was a quaint little store filled with old books, hand-painted ornaments, and knickknacks that seemed to carry the weight of generations. The warm scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, and the sound of soft Christmas carols played in the background. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, its branches adorned with delicate glass baubles and twinkling lights. "Make yourself comfortable," the woman said, leading her to a small armchair by the window. "I think we can use some tea to warm up." Lily sat down, feeling the warmth of the room seep into her cold fingers and toes. The woman soon returned with a steaming cup of tea, which she handed to Lily with a smile. As they sat together, the woman listened as Lily shared a few quiet words about her life. She didn't go into detail about her loneliness or the pain of being an orphan. Instead, she spoke about the Christmas decorations, the snow falling outside, and the small things she loved about the season. The woman nodded, her face filled with understanding, before standing up and walking to a nearby table. "You know," the woman said, turning back to Lily, "Christmas is a time for miracles. Sometimes, a little kindness can change everything." Lily didn't know why, but those words seemed to resonate deep within her heart. The woman returned, holding something wrapped in shiny red paper. "I have a small gift for you, dear," she said, handing it to Lily. For the first time in a long while, Lily felt her heart flutter with hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that came from a long-anticipated present or a family reunion. It was the quiet, unexpected hope that perhaps her life was about to change forever. She carefully unwrapped the gift, revealing a simple wooden box. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was a beautiful silver locket. The intricate design was like nothing she had ever seen, delicate, elegant, and mysterious. "Open it," the woman urged gently. Lily hesitated but then flipped the locket open. Inside was a small, faded photograph of a young girl, smiling brightly. It was a picture of herself, the same face she saw every day in the mirror. "But, how?" she whispered, stunned. The woman smiled, her eyes twinkling with warmth. "A little kindness, my dear. That's all it takes to start a new beginning." And in that moment, everything changed. The warmth of the little shop surrounded Lily as she held the silver locket in her hand, turning it over and over, mesmerized by the delicate craftsmanship. The elderly woman had left her for a moment to tend to something in the back of the store, but Lily's mind was racing. How could this be? The locket, her own image inside it, seemed like an impossible gift, as though it had been made just for her. The stranger's kindness felt like a lifeline in the middle of the cold, lonely night. But with every passing moment, an uneasy feeling began to settle in her chest. She glanced at the shop's door. The snowfall outside had thickened, and the streets were now deserted. A strange silence hung in the air, making the cheerful decorations and soft carols feel distant. Lily's fingers tightened around the locket as she tried to process everything that had just happened. How had the woman known about the photograph? How could she have given her something so personal when they had only just met? Just as Lily began to wrestle with the unsettling questions, the door swung open with a sharp jingle of the bell. Two men entered the shop, their steps heavy and unsteady. Lily's eyes widened as they walked toward the counter, their voices low and rough. "Is it ready?" one of them asked, his tone gruff. The elderly woman, who had been arranging some gifts on the shelves, froze. Her warm demeanor faltered for just a second, and for the first time, Lily noticed the faint flicker of unease in her eyes. "Almost," she replied, her voice soft, though a bit strained. "But please, not here. Can we meet tomorrow?" The men exchanged a look, and the taller one, his face shadowed by a thick beard, stepped forward. "We've waited long enough. You've got what we need, don't you?" Lily felt a strange tension in the air, like a storm was brewing. Her fingers gripped the locket tighter as she instinctively shifted in her chair, unsure of what was happening. The woman, whom she had come to trust in such a short amount of time, seemed to hesitate. The tall man's voice grew louder, his words edged with frustration. "You can't back out now. This is our deal, and it's too late to change things. You don't want to make us angry, do you?" Lily's heart thudded in her chest as she watched the exchange. The warm, comforting atmosphere that had once enveloped her was now tinged with something darker. The shop, once filled with Christmas cheer, now felt cold and suffocating. The elderly woman's face paled, but she held her ground. "I haven't changed my mind," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You'll get your payment when it's ready. Nothing sooner." The men exchanged looks, Then with a grunt, the shorter one turned to leave, his boots scraping against the floor. The taller man lingered a moment longer, his eyes narrowing as he gave the woman one last look before following his companion out into the night. Lily sat frozen in the armchair, her heart still racing. The quiet jingling of the doorbell echoed in the shop long after the men had left. She didn't know what had just transpired, but one thing was clear, something was terribly wrong. The elderly woman slowly walked back to Lily, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the locket. Lily instinctively pulled it closer to her chest, and the woman's eyes softened with a mix of guilt and regret. "I'm sorry, dear," the woman said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "This wasn't supposed to happen." Lily's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? What's going on?" The woman sat down across from her, taking a deep breath before speaking again. "I've made some choices in my life that led me down a difficult path. I wasn't always like this, helping people, giving gifts. But over the years, I got involved in things I shouldn't have. People I shouldn't have trusted. And now," she trailed off, her eyes distant. Lily felt a pang of sympathy for the woman but also a sense of deep sadness. This kind stranger, who had just given her the most thoughtful gift, seemed to be carrying a weight far heavier than any she could have imagined. "I was just trying to do something good," the woman continued, her voice barely a whisper. "But sometimes, no matter how hard we try, the world has a way of pulling us back into darkness." Lily's mind was swirling. She had seen the kindness in this woman, felt the genuine care she had shown, and yet now she understood that there was something much deeper at play. The woman wasn't just giving away gifts, she was trying to make up for past mistakes, to fix something broken in her own life. But Lily's heart sank as she realized the gift she had received wasn't just a simple gesture, it was a part of something much larger, something tangled in a web of regret and unfinished business. As the silence stretched between them, Lily's voice broke through, her words filled with uncertainty but also a surprising amount of strength. "You've been kind to me. You gave me this locket, but it feels like there's something more you're trying to hide. I don't know what it is, but I want to help, if I can." The woman's eyes filled with tears as she reached out, touching Lily's hand with an almost pleading gentleness. "You already are, dear. You already are." The tension of the moment lingered in the air, the weight of unspoken truths hanging over them both. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, Lily felt a small spark of hope inside her, a belief that perhaps, despite the darkness and the past, there was still room for redemption. There was still a chance for something good to come from this strange encounter, a glimmer of light amidst the shadows of the holiday season. The Christmas Eve air felt colder as Lily stood in the doorway of the little shop, watching the snow fall in thick, swirling patterns, the street now bathed in an eerie quiet. The festive cheer of the town seemed so distant now, muffled by the weight of the conversation that had unfolded within the warmth of the shop. Despite the twinkling lights that adorned the street outside, the Christmas tree in the corner, and the soft hum of carols still playing faintly in the background, everything felt out of place. The cheerful decorations, the vibrant holiday displays, and the laughter from the town seemed like distant echoes compared to the heavy silence inside the shop. The warmth of the season seemed to have been replaced by something darker, more complicated. Lily had barely processed the woman's confession when a new wave of uncertainty flooded her heart. She had come here looking for a simple moment of kindness, an unexpected Christmas miracle. And in many ways, that's exactly what she had found. The locket, the warm tea, the caring words of the elderly woman, they all felt like a dream come true, a symbol of hope in the otherwise lonely existence Lily had grown accustomed to. But now, the realization that the woman's past was tangled with something dangerous, something she could barely comprehend, left Lily feeling uneasy, uncertain about how to move forward. The woman, still sitting in the chair across from Lily, seemed lost in thought. Her eyes were distant, filled with a sadness that was hard to read, but the tension in her posture was unmistakable. Her hand still hovered over the teacup, though it was now cold and untouched. The world outside continued with its holiday bustle, but the world inside the shop had grown strangely still. "What's going to happen now?" Lily asked quietly, her voice thick with concern. The woman's face softened as she looked at Lily. "I don't know, dear. I don't know if there's a way to make up for the things I've done. I've tried. I've really tried, but the past has a way of catching up with you." Lily shook her head, confusion furrowing her brow. "But you're here now. You're trying to do good. You gave me the locket. That means something, doesn't it?" The elderly woman sighed, her shoulders slumping as though the weight of her years and mistakes was too much to bear. "It should mean something. But the people I've been involved with, they don't just let go of things that easily. They'll come for me, and they'll come for what I owe them." Lily stood up suddenly, her heart racing. "What do you mean? What do you owe them?" Her mind swirled with questions, her chest tight with anxiety. She couldn't quite grasp what the woman was saying, but the urgency in her voice only heightened the fear that had begun to take root. The woman's gaze shifted to the window, as if searching for something out there in the falling snow. "It's not about money or objects. It's something else. Something they believe they can control. And if I don't deliver what they want, they'll make sure I pay the price." Lily's stomach dropped. The shadows outside seemed to stretch further into the shop as the weight of the words settled around her like a dark fog. The warmth of the room felt colder now, the festive decorations mocking the reality of the situation. Christmas, a time for miracles, had become a reminder of the past the woman couldn't escape from. And Lily, still clutching the silver locket, felt like she was caught in the middle of something far bigger than she ever imagined. Before she could ask more questions, the sound of the shop's doorbell jingling again broke the silence. Lily's heart skipped a beat. A tall figure, cloaked in a dark overcoat, stepped into the shop. He looked around quickly, his eyes sharp and calculating, before his gaze locked onto the elderly woman. The room grew even colder, the festive warmth from before suddenly drained by the presence of this stranger. "You know what we want," the man said, his voice low and cold. "And it's time you delivered." The elderly woman stood slowly, her face pale, her body stiff. "I told you, I can't do this. Not anymore." Lily's mind raced as she glanced between the woman and the stranger. The festive lights outside seemed to flicker, as if even they were reacting to the tension in the air. The man took a step forward, his presence commanding the room. "You don't get to choose," he said, his tone dark and menacing. "You've made a deal. And deals like this don't just get forgotten. You're going to give us what we're owed, or there will be consequences." The woman's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she wasn't sure what to do. She wanted to run, to escape the tension that felt as heavy as the snow that blanketed the town outside, but something inside her told her to stay. The woman had been kind to her. She had given her the locket, something that felt so personal, so special. And now, Lily couldn't just leave her to face whatever danger this man represented. The stranger eyed Lily, his gaze cold and calculating, before he smirked. "She's not the one who owes us, is she?" he said to the woman, his voice laced with an almost cruel amusement. "I'm sure she doesn't know a thing about our business." Lily felt a shiver run down her spine, but she refused to back down. She stepped forward, clutching the locket tightly in her hand. "What do you want with her?" she asked, her voice trembling but determined. "Why are you threatening her?" The man turned toward her slowly, his eyes narrowing. "This is none of your business, little girl. Go home and forget you ever saw us." But Lily's eyes were defiant. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew one thing for sure, the woman had given her a gift, and that act of kindness deserved something in return. She couldn't just stand by and watch this man take everything away from her. The tension in the room was palpable, the contrast between the warmth of Christmas and the cold threat of danger like a bitter reminder of the world outside. The holiday season, once filled with magic and hope, now felt like a backdrop to a conflict Lily hadn't asked for but had no choice but to face. The man's eyes bore into Lily, his face hardening as he saw the defiance in her expression. For a moment, it seemed like the world had come to a standstill. Christmas, with all its warmth and joy, felt like a distant, unreachable place. The snow outside continued to fall in delicate flakes, but inside the shop, the cold of uncertainty and fear seemed to hang in the air. Lily's heart raced. She hadn't planned on standing up to this man, or getting involved in a situation far beyond her understanding. But something inside her refused to let the woman who had shown her kindness be intimidated any longer. The thought of walking away, of pretending nothing was happening, didn't sit right. This was bigger than her, bigger than the strange gift she had received. It was about standing up for what was right, even when everything seemed stacked against you. "You're not going to get away with this," Lily said, her voice trembling but firm. She took a step forward, holding the locket tightly in her hand. "I don't care what you think you're owed. This isn't the way." The stranger's smirk faded, replaced by a look of irritation. "You don't know anything, kid. You have no idea what you're dealing with." He turned back to the elderly woman, his tone sharp. "I told you, this is your last chance. Give us what we want, or the consequences will be severe." The woman's face crumbled as she looked at Lily, her eyes filled with both gratitude and sorrow. "I never wanted this life for you, dear," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never meant to bring you into this mess." Lily felt her chest tighten as the weight of the woman's words sank in. The kindness she had shown, the locket, the warmth, they were all part of something far more complicated, far darker than Lily could have ever imagined. The woman's past, her mistakes, had led to this dangerous crossroads. And now, in the face of her own fear and regret, Lily had no choice but to face it head-on. The silence in the shop was suffocating. The snow outside blurred in the window, as if the world was waiting for something to change. Then, in a split second, the elderly woman's hand reached out, trembling, and touched Lily's arm gently. "Go home, Lily," she whispered. "It's too dangerous. I'll handle this. It's not your fight." But Lily didn't move. She couldn't. The thought of walking away, of abandoning the woman who had been nothing but kind to her, was unbearable. And yet, in the depths of her heart, she understood something that had eluded her up until now. Kindness was more than a gift, it was a bond. A bond that could bring light even into the darkest places. Just as she was about to speak, the door to the shop swung open once again. This time, it wasn't the tall, threatening figure who entered. Instead, another figure stepped in, a man, older than the first, but with an unmistakable sense of authority in his posture. His clothes were sharp, his demeanor calm but firm. His eyes scanned the room and immediately landed on the elderly woman and Lily, before shifting to the man threatening them both. "What's going on here?" the newcomer asked, his voice low but commanding. The stranger, still glaring at Lily and the elderly woman, hesitated. "This doesn't concern you," he snapped. "Leave." But the man didn't move. Instead, he crossed the room slowly, his gaze never leaving the other man. He addressed the woman, his voice softening. "I've come to settle things." Lily's heart skipped a beat as she watched the two men face each other. There was something familiar about the newcomer, but she couldn't place it. He was calm, collected, his presence almost calming. But it was the way the elderly woman's face shifted, relief flooding her features, that made Lily's stomach flip. "You," the elderly woman whispered, her eyes wide in shock and disbelief. "You're here." The stranger nodded. "It's time to make things right." Lily felt a strange sense of understanding sweep over her. Something was happening, something that hadn't been clear before. The new man didn't seem like a threat, but rather like someone who was there to change the situation, to bring an end to the darkness that had been haunting the woman for so long. The tall stranger who had been demanding his due stepped back, his eyes narrowing as the new man stood between him and the elderly woman. "You think you can stop me?" he growled, his voice dripping with disdain. But the man stood tall, unwavering. "I think you've had your turn. It's over." The tension in the air was thick as the two men locked eyes, but then something incredible happened. The tall stranger's expression faltered. His hands clenched into fists, but he didn't move. It was as though the very air in the room had shifted, and the weight of what had been wrong for so long was finally starting to be corrected. And then, without another word, the man turned and walked toward the door, his steps heavy with frustration but ultimately, with defeat. As he left the shop, the door jingled softly, and Lily couldn't help but exhale a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The elderly woman collapsed into the nearest chair, her face now streaked with tears. I thought I would never be free of them," she murmured, her voice trembling. "But you," she looked up at the man who had entered so suddenly, her eyes filled with something between awe and relief. "You saved me." Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the truth. The man who had come to their aid wasn't just a stranger. He was someone from the woman's past, someone who had the power to right the wrongs and bring an end to the suffering that had plagued her for so long. But more than that, he had come as a symbol of redemption, of forgiveness. The man turned to Lily, offering her a gentle smile. "I'm sorry you had to see all of that, young lady. But sometimes, the Christmas spirit works in mysterious ways." Lily's eyes widened in understanding. This wasn't just a random act of kindness. This was something more, something that reflected the true meaning of Christmas. Forgiveness. Love. The willingness to face the darkness and still reach out with kindness. "I don't know what to say," Lily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved us both." The man nodded, his eyes soft with compassion. Sometimes, the biggest miracles are the ones that happen when we least expect them. And in that moment, as the shop filled with the soft glow of the Christmas lights and the snowfall continued outside, Lily understood. The Christmas spirit wasn't just about gifts or decorations, it was about second chances, about love that transcended the mistakes of the past. It was about finding light in the darkest of times and holding on to it, no matter what. And in that moment, everything had changed. The events of that evening had shaken Lily to her core. As she sat beside the elderly woman, now safe from the threats that had loomed over them both, the silence in the shop felt different. It was no longer thick with fear but filled with a quiet peace, a moment of reflection after the storm had passed. Lily had always prided herself on being independent, on handling things on her own. After all, she had learned early in life that people weren't always kind, and life didn't always hand out second chances. She had grown accustomed to her loneliness, to her solitude. Christmas had always been just another day, a time to retreat into herself, to avoid the memories of a broken home and an uncertain future. But tonight, everything had changed. The kindness the elderly woman had shown her, the courage the man had brought to their rescue, it had awakened something in Lily that she had buried for far too long, the belief in the goodness of people. As the elderly woman rested her head against the back of the chair, a soft sigh escaping her lips, Lily looked out the window. The snow had started to settle, and the twinkling lights from the town below seemed brighter now, almost like the world was waking up from a long, dark sleep. She had been a part of something larger than herself tonight, something more important than just her own struggles. She had witnessed firsthand the power of compassion, of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. She had come here expecting nothing more than a quiet, simple moment of kindness in a world that often seemed too cold. But instead, she had found something that had eluded her for years, a sense of belonging, a reminder that the human connection could still heal the wounds of the past. She thought back to the locket, the symbol the elderly woman had given her, a gift of hope, and realized that the true miracle of Christmas wasn't about receiving something tangible. It was about how you chose to move forward, how you chose to open your heart even when the world seemed intent on closing it off. Lily smiled softly, her thoughts turning inward. She realized that, in a way, this Christmas had been her own transformation. She had been the orphan, the one who never quite felt at home anywhere. But tonight, she had found her place. It wasn't a physical location, but a space in her heart where love and compassion could flourish despite everything. The kindness that had been shown to her by the elderly woman, and now by the man, was a gift far beyond anything material. It was the gift of belief, of hope, and of new beginnings. The elderly woman, who had once seemed so lost in her own regret, now looked up at Lily with gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, my dear," she said softly. "You've done more for me than I can ever repay." Lily shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "No, you saved me. You gave me something I didn't even know I needed." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I thought I was alone in the world, but now I see that there's always someone willing to help. We just have to let them in." The elderly woman smiled, her face softening as she took Lily's hand. "I've lived a long life, and I've made my share of mistakes. But I've learned that no matter how far we've fallen, there's always a chance to rise again. And it's never too late to make things right." Lily squeezed her hand, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. The older woman's words struck a chord deep within her, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her own potential. Perhaps she, too, could find a way to make things right in her own life. She had been so focused on her past, so consumed by the things that had gone wrong, that she had never considered the possibility of redemption, of forgiveness, for herself. The man who had come to their rescue had stayed quietly in the background, watching the two women as they shared their quiet moment. His presence was like a steady anchor in the midst of the whirlwind that had just passed. Lily turned to him, feeling a sense of gratitude she couldn't quite express. He had come from nowhere, yet his appearance had changed everything. His willingness to face the darkness, to challenge the man who had threatened them, had brought light into the room, into their lives. He had shown Lily that the greatest gift one could give wasn't just saving someone from danger, but offering the chance for redemption and peace. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. The man smiled, his eyes filled with quiet wisdom. "You don't need to thank me. I'm just a part of this story, just like you are. Sometimes, it's the smallest actions that lead to the greatest changes." Lily nodded, her heart full. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't a peace that came from perfection or from everything being fixed. It was a peace that came from knowing that, even in the most difficult times, there was still hope, still love, and still the possibility of transformation. She realized then that her Christmas had not been about the things she had received, but about what she could give, her belief, her heart, and her willingness to move forward, no matter the past. The elderly woman, her face alight with a quiet joy, added, "Christmas isn't just about miracles happening to us. It's about creating them, about being the miracle for someone else." Lily's eyes shone as she looked at the woman, at the man, and at the world outside the shop. She understood now, more than ever, that kindness wasn't just a gift, it was a force. It was what had changed her life and, in turn, what would allow her to transform others' lives, too. As the night drew on and the Christmas bells tolled in the distance, Lily knew that this was just the beginning of something new, something beautiful. And, for the first time in a long time, she looked forward to the future with hope. The days following that fateful evening were filled with an unusual sense of calm that rippled throughout the small town. Word of the events at the shop, though no one knew all the details, spread quickly. It was the holiday season, after all, and in a town where the Christmas spirit ran deep, there was a special kind of magic in the air, one that seemed to make people pause and reflect on their own lives. In the wake of the chaos that had nearly torn apart the elderly woman's world, something miraculous had occurred. The town's sense of community, of interconnectedness, had grown stronger. For Lily, the change was immediate. The once solitary girl who had walked through life with walls built high around her heart began to see the world through a different lens. She noticed the small acts of kindness that had always existed but that she had never taken the time to acknowledge, the way people helped one another with groceries during the snowy mornings, the smiles exchanged between strangers in the market, and the warmth of an unexpected conversation with someone passing by. The kindness she had witnessed that night, especially from the elderly woman and the man who had saved them both, had sparked something within Lily, a desire to be part of that warmth, that sense of connection. She started volunteering at the town's community center, which, like most places, saw an increase in visitors during the holiday season. There, she met people who had been struggling with their own burdens, who had been in similar situations to hers, isolated, uncertain, and longing for a little bit of light. Lily began to listen to their stories, share her own, and offer whatever help she could. At first, it was small gestures, giving a hand to someone carrying heavy bags, offering a warm drink to a tired parent, but as the days went by, she realized the power of these acts. The simple, small things could make the biggest difference in someone's life. Her involvement didn't go unnoticed. The elderly woman, whose name was Margaret, had not only found peace but had also been inspired by the way Lily's presence had transformed the space around her. Margaret began opening up to others in the community about her past and the difficulties she had faced, and soon she became a local symbol of resilience. She shared her story with those who were struggling, showing them that even when the past seemed insurmountable, there was always hope for healing. People began to visit her shop more often, not just to buy her beautiful handcrafted goods, but to hear her wisdom, to connect with her. She had become, in her own quiet way, a beacon of strength and grace. And then there was the man, the stranger who had come to their rescue. His name was Nathan, and his role in the town's transformation was more profound than anyone could have imagined. After the events at the shop, he didn't disappear into the background, as people had expected. Instead, he stayed in town, quietly helping where he could, whether it was repairing old fences for families in need or organizing holiday dinners for those without the means to celebrate. Nathan had seen the cracks in the community and had worked to mend them, not with grand gestures but through the small, steady work of building trust and goodwill. It wasn't long before the town began to reflect the changes that had taken place within Lily, Margaret, and Nathan. People started coming together more, offering their support to one another. The local bakery began donating extra bread to the shelter, families started inviting those who were alone for Christmas dinners, and people stopped to check in on neighbors they had never spoken to before. There was an undeniable shift in the air, a subtle yet powerful transformation. The holiday spirit wasn't confined to a single day anymore, it had become a way of life, woven into the fabric of the community itself. One evening, as the snow began to fall again, the town held its annual Christmas Eve celebration in the town square. The event was always a big deal, with lights strung across every building and carolers filling the streets. But this year, the atmosphere felt different, more alive, more connected. As Lily stood there, watching the children run and play in the snow, Margaret beside her and Nathan not far off, she realized just how far they had all come. The people around her, strangers, neighbors, and friends, had become her family. And in that moment, Lily understood that kindness wasn't just a personal thing, it was something that rippled outward, touching everyone it encountered, transforming lives in ways that could never be predicted. The spirit of Christmas had done more than just change the three of them, it had brought an entire community together, healing old wounds and rekindling a sense of togetherness that no one had even realized they had lost. The holiday season had given them all a chance to look beyond themselves, to see one another not as strangers or burdens but as people deserving of kindness and compassion. And as Lily looked out over the snowy square, her heart full of gratitude and love, she knew that this was what Christmas truly meant, not the gifts under the tree or the decorations on the wall, but the bonds we share, the healing we offer one another, and the way our lives can be forever changed by the kindness we choose to give. That year, the town's Christmas celebration wasn't just a gathering of people, it was a celebration of community, of new beginnings, and of the power of the human heart to bring light into even the darkest of times. It was Christmas Eve, and the town square buzzed with energy, filled with families, laughter, and the glow of festive lights. The annual celebration had grown more lively over the years, but tonight, it felt like something extraordinary was about to unfold. The crisp, cold air was filled with the scent of pine and roasting chestnuts, the snowflakes glimmering like tiny stars as they drifted down from the sky. Lily, standing at the edge of the crowd, felt a tightness in her chest, anticipation mixed with a sense of deep gratitude. This Christmas was different. It was the culmination of everything she had come to understand over the past few weeks, a moment of truth where the true meaning of the season was about to reveal itself. Margaret stood beside her, her hand resting on Lily's arm. Nathan, the man who had changed everything for them, had stepped away for a moment, his gaze scanning the crowd. But he wasn't alone, he was standing near the edge of the square, speaking to someone. Lily couldn't see who it was, but something about his demeanor made her feel uneasy. There was a heaviness in the air that she couldn't shake, as if something was brewing just beyond the surface. Then, she saw him, the man who had threatened Margaret all those weeks ago, the one whose anger and greed had almost destroyed their lives. He was back. Her heart sank as he approached Nathan and Margaret. His presence was like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over the otherwise joyful evening. People began to murmur, noticing the tension, the shift in the air. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to step forward, to intervene, but she didn't know how. Was he here to cause trouble again? To undo everything that had been rebuilt? Nathan stood his ground, his body tense but calm. Margaret's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. The crowd began to gather around, sensing something was amiss. Lily moved closer, her heart racing, trying to make sense of the scene unfolding in front of her. The man stepped closer to Margaret, his eyes locked on hers. "I should have known you'd be here, playing the saint, trying to make up for everything," he sneered. "But it's too late. The debts still need to be paid." Lily stepped forward without thinking, her voice trembling but determined. "No. You don't get to do this. Not today. Not here." The man turned, surprised by her outburst. He sneered. "And what are you going to do about it, girl?" Nathan's voice was low, steady, yet filled with an undeniable authority. "This ends now," he said, his eyes locked onto the man's. "The past is over. You don't get to control anyone's life anymore. Not Margaret's, not anyone's." The man's face twisted in frustration, his fists clenching, but it was clear he was losing his resolve. The weight of the crowd's gaze, the undeniable sense that he had no place in the light of this community, began to chip away at him. His anger simmered, but in the face of Nathan's calm and the solidarity of the people around them, it faltered. For a moment, the crowd held its breath, waiting for what would come next. Then, something unexpected happened. The man looked around, his defiance fading into something much softer, much quieter. His shoulders slumped as he let out a long, defeated sigh. He turned away, his back to Margaret and Nathan, and without a word, began to walk toward the edge of the square, melting into the crowd. The tension in the air broke instantly, replaced by a wave of relief so palpable it seemed to wash over everyone present. Lily felt as though she could breathe again, as if the weight of the past was finally being lifted from their shoulders. Margaret, her eyes filled with unshed tears, took a deep breath and turned to Nathan. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave me back my freedom." Nathan nodded, his expression softening. "You gave yourself that freedom," he said quietly. "You just needed to believe in it." Lily stepped closer, her eyes welling up as she looked at both of them. The realization hit her like a wave. This wasn't just a victory for them, it was a victory for the whole town, for the community that had stood strong together, for the kindness that had blossomed amidst the darkness. As the Christmas bells rang out in the distance, the people around them began to cheer, their voices lifting in song as the town square lit up in a blaze of color and joy. In that moment, everything felt right. There were no more shadows lurking, no more fear or uncertainty. There was only light, the kind of light that filled every corner of their hearts and reminded them all of the power of kindness, forgiveness, and second chances. Lily, standing among her newfound family, felt something she had never truly understood before, a deep, profound peace. Christmas, she realized, wasn't just about the gifts or the decorations. It was about what they had built together, a community bound by love, compassion, and the willingness to forgive. This was the miracle she had been waiting for, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have ever imagined. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the season, she knew that her life, just like the town, would never be the same again. The town square glowed in the aftermath of the confrontation, its streets bathed in the soft light of Christmas decorations and the warmth of a community united. The crowd had dispersed, their excitement lingering in the air, but for Lily, the magic of the moment had only just begun to sink in. As she stood with Margaret and Nathan, the snow gently falling around them, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. It wasn't just the joy of a holiday celebration or the relief from a danger that had passed, it was something deeper. It was the understanding that the true spirit of Christmas wasn't in the things we received, but in the things we gave to one another, compassion, forgiveness, and the willingness to start anew. As the bells in the distance rang out, signaling midnight, Lily turned to Margaret. The older woman's face was full of contentment, a soft smile resting on her lips. "I never thought I'd see the day when I could breathe easy again," she said, her voice a whisper, as though savoring the peace she had fought so hard to reclaim. "But this is more than I ever dreamed of." Lily reached for Margaret's hand, a silent understanding passing between them. "We did this together," she said quietly, a smile forming on her own lips. "We found each other, and we found hope." Nathan, standing beside them, looked up at the sky, his gaze distant yet full of promise. "The world is full of second chances," he said softly. "Sometimes, we just have to be brave enough to take them." As they all stood there, the sound of carolers floating in from the edge of the square, Lily felt the weight of the past lift. She wasn't the same person who had walked into Margaret's shop that night, uncertain and alone. She had found a new sense of purpose, a new family, and most importantly, a new belief in the power of love and kindness. Christmas, she realized, wasn't a single day. It was the way we chose to live, to reach out to one another, and to make the world a little brighter, one small act of kindness at a time. The snow continued to fall, each flake a reminder of the fresh start they had all been given. And as the town embraced the magic of the season, Lily knew that this Christmas would be a turning point in her life, a reminder that no matter where we come from or what we've endured, there is always room for hope, for love, and for miracles.